Hello, apologies I'm late. Uh, Emma and Emma, or is it the same Emma? It's just twice. Not sure. Okay, so I'm gonna today's topic is on adverse events. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Oh, Emma Grant's disappeared. Emma, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Great, okay, excellent. Uh, just loading. Okay, so we're just gonna talk about adverse events, which is a huge activity that the hospital gets involved with, reporting through Safety First and then investigating. And there's this just coming all the time. So we're basically talking about when something goes wrong. And whenever something goes wrong, you have to first of all care for the patient, because obviously the patient might need immediate care. We would then communicate with the patient, tell them what's going on, and report it. So obviously in our area, we use Safety First as the main reporting mechanism, but you may also mention it to line manager, to colleagues, etc., so that everybody can start to learn from it. And then, of course, document it in the medical record. That's pretty obvious. So why is communication difficult after an adverse event? I mean, it all sounds simple enough, but in reality, it's often doesn't happen as nicely as that. Well, when things go wrong, there's obviously there's usually quite an emotional and psychological reaction to it. There may be feelings of regret or fear or anger, and those can prevent us from being open and transparent. There might be a psychological need to preserve your sense of self. You might be scared of being subject to anger. You might be fearful for your job, or being reprimanded. Um, in severe cases, you might be worried about medical malpractice, being investigated by the regulatory body, being struck off, or in some jurisdictions, probably very uncommonly in New Zealand, but other places, being sued. And just fear of reputational loss with your colleagues and other people as well. So there's a lot at stake when things go wrong. But it's good to remember that no one's perfect. In fact, one thing that I always like to start with is that no one comes to work to do a bad job. Everybody comes with the intention to do a good job. Well, almost everybody. There is the occasional um, criminal amongst us, but apart from that, so I mean, it's good to start from that position of assuming that everybody is here to do the best job that they can. Um, so using that, we can that can be the starting point from promoting an environment that's all about learning from when things go wrong and trying to make things better in the future. So communicating with patients is probably the most vital part about adverse events, and there's a lot of research into this area, and it shows that most patients want to be told if something's gone wrong, even the minor things that have gone wrong. They want to be told, and you're often surprised at just how accepting they will be of any errors that happen. Um, uh, if something's gone wrong, they often want to hear a sorry. A sorry being an acknowledgement of being a way to empathize. It's a tool to empathize with someone rather than just admitting guilt. Obviously, we don't get much suing here, but it's useful to understand why people would sue, because people are the same around the world. It's just that they have other avenues in New Zealand other than suing. But suing is the ultimate action after complaint, really. So it's the same spectrum. They're concerned about the standard of care. They want this. They want to prevent this happening again to other people, and that's quite a strong thing in other people. They're upset that's what happened, and they don't want it to happen again. They think there's a strong sense of sort of justice. They might need an explanation. Quite often they're confused about what's happened, or it's not been well explained to them, or they've not been in a when it was explained to them, they weren't in the right frame of mind to understand and process it because of their emotions, perhaps. They may want compensation for the losses, or to help pay for future costs of care, and that's where ACC helps us a lot. And accountability. They want somebody to stand up and say, "We're sorry, this shouldn't have happened." And often, if they don't get that immediately from us, then they go down these formal routes. So when it comes to communicating with patients, you have to use judgment. The timing matters. Need to consider the severity. So decisions about how to communicate with the patient should be on an individual basis, made as a team, and informed by organizational policy. But normally, you can make a pretty quick judgment call at the time to know that it's probably good to just speak to them straight away. Timing matters because sometimes it's not in the patient's best interest to know about it straight away. So if they're in the middle of, if they're critically unwell from the adverse event, say they're having to go to ICU because something's gone wrong, that's obviously not the time to start explaining what went wrong, because the focus at that particular time is just trying to make things better, clinically better. So sometimes you do defer the communication to an appropriate time. And also the severity. So it's probably not necessary to communicate with a patient about a near miss that doesn't cause them harm, but probably everything else you would talk about. What you say, obviously what happened, and how it will affect the patient. You know, if there's any short-term or long-term sequelae. Then this is probably really important. It's a statement of empathy, as I said, saying sorry. And actually the word sorry is probably the best word to use. Even better than I apologize or anything else. Sorry seems to be the most acceptable word. And it is not an admission of guilt. But in America, quite a lot of lawyers see it as an admission of guilt, and therefore in America this is very, very difficult quite often to adhere to this principle. But fortunately in New Zealand, we don't have any sort of counter advice against that word, so it's really important to use sorry. It's not admitting guilt, it's more about saying, I understand the situation you're in, and from one human to the other, it's I empathize with you. And then a promise to follow up. So obviously people want things to be better in the future, but they won't know that if you don't ever come back to them and tell them what's going on. And this is very easy to forget. So there's a format for being able to apologize. And this goes for things that you're directly to blame for, as well as things that you're not to blame for at all. You're maybe even apologizing on the behalf of someone else or behalf of this service. An acknowledgement of what's happened, an explanation, an expression of remorse, and a reparation. What's going to happen to make it better. So we got a few examples here. We'll go through it. How would you apologize for these ones? You borrowed your friend's favorite shirt and lost it. The second one, there are no beds in the hospital, so you had to cancel the patient's surgery. This is quite a common scenario in my part of the organization. Often, 50% of our patients travel from outside Dunedin, so it's severe inconvenience for them if that happens. The third scenario, patient's husband has written to complain about his wife who's in hospital and is being ignored by the nurses. But in fact, she's been pressing the call bell incessantly. Okay, so taking these in turn. So first one, I'm sorry that I borrowed your favorite shirt and lost it. That happened because I was forgetful and I probably didn't respect your property enough. And it makes me feel guilty because I should have been more respectful and let you know. And in the future, I'm going to buy a new t-shirt and I hope this might make things better. I won't do it again. So works for that one. And then say second scenario, which is pretty common. Quite often it might be like a junior member of staff. So say it might, because I might be operating at the time that the patient's cancelled. So you might send like a house officer, or it might be a manager, or it might be even a nurse in the day surgery unit who's got nothing to do with the fact that it's been cancelled. So you start off with saying, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to cancel your surgery today because the other case on the list has gone overrun, or because there are no beds in the hospital because of an unexpected surge of patients through the emergency department. And I'm really sorry. I can understand this probably is a huge inconvenience for you, disappointment. You're probably really looking forward to feeling better after this operation. And to try and make this better, I'm going to identify a date for you to come back, or even better, you're going to come back in 2 weeks' time and we'll try this again. So it's a good framework for apologizing. Probably the one thing in here that makes it really genuine is actually how it makes you feel. So if you can express how you're feeling as a result of that, that is a good demonstration of empathy. I've just been through it also. So how would you feel? Yeah. So how would you feel? That last one here I didn't show you before. So you administered 1,000 units of insulin instead of 10 to a critical ill patient. Patient died because of an overdose. Well, you'd obviously feel absolutely devastated. That would be something really, really difficult to get over. It's just, other things that you might be feeling, stress, lack of confidence, inability to think or concentrate, it could really affect your work. You could feel like a failure. You feel like your co-workers are now don't trust you and they're just giving you glances all the time or looking over your shoulder, checking on your work. And if your confidence goes, then that can maybe even lead to further mistakes. You might turn to drugs or alcohol to try and sedate yourself about this. So the impact is quite phenomenal. And this is what we call the second victim. So the second victim is the member of staff or members of staff who've been involved in the adverse event, where they're typically where they feel that some blame lies with them. And often we're pretty harsh on ourselves, actually. We probably attribute more blame to ourselves than actually is fair, because we obviously work in a system, and the system has many environmental and sort of inherent risk factors that can lead to errors happening. But as individuals, when we have an emotional reaction to certain really bad events like this, we don't have a system view approach to it. We can only kind of see our own world. So that's how it can become the second victim. So it's in any adverse event, it's also really worth looking after the staff who've been involved and to give them a good structured approach to rehabilitation. And that would include debriefing, which is something that we're not very good at doing. So a debriefing is a really good way to start the recovery for staff from a very particularly bad adverse event. So yeah, support should begin with a team of people, and second victims need early identification and provision of ongoing support, coordination with of the institution's overall event response to include gossip control. So sometimes it's important for line members to try and just stop all those whispers in the corridor happening. And for you to be able to do that as a line manager, you need to have your ear to the ground, and that's difficult, especially if you're very busy. So yeah. Are there any questions about adverse events, or maybe adverse events that you have been involved with, investigated, or if you were the second victim? Is there any sort of experience that people would like to share?
I was just going to share that sometimes in investigation, apportioning responsibility appropriately between individuals and organisations. Sometimes it's hard to see that in reports. It tends to be a bit one-sided.
Yeah. So you're saying that often reports, apportion the responsibility to one individual only or one particular team only, and don't really. Yeah. It can certainly come across like that. And the better reports do a better root cause analysis. So if you've got a good experienced investigator, they will do a root cause analysis, which one of the tools for that is called 5 whys, where you ask why something happened, and then you ask why did that happen, and then you keep going for 5 times, and it's usually only then do you actually get down to the root cause. And if you do a proper root cause analysis, then your report comes out much more broad in terms of there are recommendations for senior governance. There'll be recommendations for improvement projects, the improvement team. There might be recommendations for the department or ward area, and then there'll be recommendations for individuals involved as well. And that's a much more balanced approach to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because
Takes
I think
a long, yeah.
I think your actions can sometimes end up being quite narrow, and then you never actually solve the problem completely. You focus on one aspect only rather than all the little systems that contributed to that.
Yeah. I think one of the big mistakes that root cause or adverse investigators go in is that they feel in their remit that they need to actually come up with solutions to fix the problem. And actually that probably then actually, if you go in wanting to find solutions, then when you're investigating, you're always thinking about the opportunities for improvement. That's what you're looking for. And that can actually lead you to disregard or kind of like deprioritize information that's not leading you to any improvement ideas. But those bits of information are vital to understanding the whole situation better. So the best investigations actually just come with the lens of trying to find out what happened and then leaving the improvement ideas for another time. But I know that our adverse events reporting in here is tied in with recommendations. So the outcome of a report is recommendations. So that means the person who's doing the investigations needs to think of solutions as they're going through the whole thing. And I think if you want a really good review, you need to separate out those two. You need to be someone who just goes in just to try and find out what happened, regardless of whether it's useful or not, just to find out exactly what happened. And then a separate review to then go on an improvement project sort of approach. But of course, that's even more time consuming. So yeah, they can be very difficult. There's another type of review framework that's called what's it called? A learning review rather than an adverse event investigation. That has its advantages. I've not got personal experience with it so much, but the framework has more advantages of the focus is learning, and also the focus is on actually involving the staff in learning together, rather than just one person finding out and writing a report. But I don't think we've managed to implement that, despite talking about it 5 years ago.
I've been involved in one, and it was around COVID. Yeah. It was excellent. It was the best the second interview that investigation I've been involved in.
Okay. So was that done as a learning review rather than?
It was.
Okay.
Yes. And it was really interesting. There were a lot of different perspectives, different staff experience.
So how did it work? How did it work?
So it was around closure of 618 due to COVID, and we had COVID for about 8 weeks. And then it looked at multiple areas, and we gauged we set up focus groups and then sat down with staff and discussions, and then asked them to tell us, what do you think was happening from your perspective? So there was a doctor's focus group, allied health, nursing. We engaged the cleaners, anyone else that was on the ward that could give us different perspectives, and it was really good. Yeah.
Great. Oh, that does sound like a good process, and probably also much more time consuming and difficult to do, especially if you wanted to scale that up to every adverse event that we do. Yeah.
I think the outcomes were better overall.
Yeah. Fantastic. Good to hear. Okay, so moving on, just got a little video to show you, which will be partially entertaining. So you might remember Will Smith and his behavior on the Oscars stage. I can't remember how long ago. It's a few years ago now. So this interview he did was the first public interview after that behavior on stage. So I guess it was his opportunity to apologize, or defend himself, or set the record straight, or whatever. But this was the first time, so it's kind of a make or break interview for him. So I'd like you to you may have watched it, but I'd like you to watch it and with me, and then we'll decide, what he did right and what he did wrong. Okay, so I'll just play this. Hopefully you'll hear the. Can you hear the audio? Thumbs up if you can hear it. Great. So we'll stop it there. So, what do people think? So if you don't know the incident, he basically got up on stage and he punched Chris Rock. And he starts off by, his first thing is, the first thing he says is, you just don't know what people are going through. And then he explains what that means. And then he says, not that that is an excuse or anything, but the fact that he's led with that is making an excuse. And you just, if what you have done is unacceptable, it actually doesn't, the context doesn't matter too much. It doesn't matter what you were going through or anything. I mean, it matters to you a lot. Certainly it matters to you in terms of learning to improve in the future, but to other people, doesn't matter so much. What matters to them is that you know that what you did was wrong, and that you know that it was not acceptable. And he just didn't lead with any of that. He led more with an explanation, which really comes off as an excuse. It's a bit more of like, kind of like pity me, pity me for my upbringing, for the shit I was going through, all that stuff, and very little to say. Oh no, I shouldn't have done that, and I'm really sorry. And I think he did lots of online apologies before the hand, and so maybe he feels that it's carrying on the conversation from that. But when you lead with an explanation of an event like that, it comes across as an excuse. So so there are examples as well of people who have done extremely well in public apologies, which has really just kind of set the slate clean for them, because they've done it in a really good way. But this is obviously an example of this. He certainly had an opportunity to do a lot better, and he didn't do that. So I think it was a very interesting interview anyway. Got any comments?
I don't know what to comment on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's and you can see how I mean, he's probably had media training and everything, and PR specialists helping him before he comes on screen like this. So you can see even with all that help, it's still difficult to actually do a good apology. So it is a difficult thing to do, and there's a lot of pitfalls. But if we do it right, if we just think about that framework that we went through previously, just about acknowledging, explaining, and expressing remorse and repatriation, then that will go a long way. So we will leave it at that. Thank you very much for coming along, and thanks. I learned a bit too about the learning review. That was great. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.